Okay, here we are at process cost, and we're going to now move on from job cost to process cost. Although we're not really adding very many new terms, because everything that you've learned in job cost, you're going to use in process cost. So keep all of these in mind: the direct, the indirect, the fixed, the variable, the period, the product, the prime. We will look at the conversion now, and the labor, the material, actual overhead, applied overhead, and then selling expenses and administrative expenses. Nothing has changed. Now, instead, though, we're going to look at what they call process, and process doesn't look at a unique product, it looks at a group of like products. So let's kind of go down. We know cost types now. We have looked at managerial versus financial, and we've looked at job cost. So now we move to process cost, and we're going to compare job to process cost, so you can make that gap. We have a new term called equivalent units, and we're really going to start using conversion costs now. And conversion costs, remember, were direct labor and, whoa, that's going to automatically fill in, direct labor. Oh, that's interesting. Direct labor and factory overhead. Those were conversion costs. I've really messed that up, haven't I? Okay, so everybody's seen me mess it up. And we're going to use weighted average. There's also a way to figure out equivalent units, which is what EUP is, equivalent units of production, using FIFO. But we're only going to use weighted average because that's what most companies do now. There's not much difference when you do the two. So we'll use weighted average. And then we're going to look at the steps of process cost. And it's really kind of sweet the way it works out. You determine the flow. Then you're going to look for the computed units of production and the computed equivalent units, which are kind of fun, and they're kind of hard to wrap around to begin with, but we'll get it. Then, after you've figured this out, you're going to assign and reconcile costs, and that sounds like a whole lot, and it really isn't. But I wanted you to see those steps. When you get this complete, these 4 steps, you're going to be able to create a process cost summary. And you're going to account for cost in materials, labor, and factory overhead, actual and applied. So all of this is, you've experienced all of these terms and the processes, but now you're going to look at it for a large group of like products rather than one product, one unique product. And then we're going to look at how to account for transfers. So you have looked at job cost sheets and cost of goods manufactured. Now we're going to look at cost summary sheet. And I think the best way to do this is just to jump right in. So first of all, let's look at the difference between a job cost. I thought this flow chart was really good. We take direct materials, direct labor, and overhead and assign them to specific jobs in job order. So each job gathers up the cost and moves to finished goods, and then we have a cost per unit for job 1, which then becomes the cost of goods sold when you sell it. Now, we're going to do the same thing. You've got direct materials, direct labor, and overhead, but instead of a job, it's going to, the materials are going to be gathered in a process, and then move to a second process, and completed and moved to finished goods. And this is what happens in a factory. Here's an example, a sheet metal factory. A sheet metal factory will start with raw materials. I guess I could find a place to... We're going to start with raw materials, it moves to the extrusion or press department, where it's made into parts. From there, it will move to maybe arc weld, where they'll put the parts together. From there, it will go to paint line for the parts to be painted. From there, it would go to an assembly department for things to be put together and packaged. And from the assembly department, it would go into shipping or finished goods. So it's really hard to assign costs to a specific product when you're doing many of them that are all the same. So instead, each process or department, press would be a process 1, arc would be process 2, paint line would 3, and assembly 4, and then finished goods or shipping or the warehouse would be the end product. And from there they would be sold. And then you would have, as each one of these parts go out the door, we will use process cost to assign a cost to them so that you can find your cost of goods sold. So that's what we're going to do. So instead of each part having a cost, it's the process that gets the cost, and then we allocate the cost from the process to the part. And that's where this equivalent unit comes into play. A lot of times, as you're passing through these departments, everything doesn't get completely done at the end of the period, or whenever the books are closed. So for that, you have what we call equivalent units. Let's say if one product starts here, and it uses all the material to begin with, we would say we have 10,000 parts with 100% of all direct materials in them. So that would equal 10,000. But that 10,000, okay, is only part way through the department. And it's only 20% of the way through direct labor. And there's only 20% of factory overhead into that part right now. So what we're going to do is find an equivalent unit. So if we take 20% times 10,000, we come up with 2,000 for direct labor. And 20% times 10,000, you come up with 2,000 parts for overhead. So your equivalent units, okay, are broken down by how complete they are. So direct materials, if I assigned a cost of 10,000 to them, each would be $1 a piece at that point. But when you come to labor and overhead, I couldn't assign that full amount. I'd have to take 20% of whatever labor there was and overhead. And let me show you. It makes a lot more sense if I show you what it looks like. So that's how we figure equivalent units of production, by taking percentages. So here we go. Let's look at this one right here. Gen X. It has a beginning inventory of 30,000 units. It has 100% of the direct materials in it, and it has 65 of conversion costs, which are direct labor and factory overhead. They started 90,000 this period, and they completed and transferred out 100,000. Well, by implication, if they completed 100,000, and the 100,000 had 100% direct materials and 100% conversion in it. They had left 20,000 that had all of the materials in it, but only 20% of the process was done on them, 25%. So this is your beginning, and now we're going to look at, right here, these are the costs. So the beginning inventory that was there to begin with, that's this group right here, had 81,000 in direct materials and 108,900 in conversion costs, for a total of 189. We added during this month 279,000, 171,000, 205,200. This was applied. This is not direct. This is, this is not actual. So this is applied. So we've added a total of $655,000 to it. So our total production cost on all of those items right now is $845,100. You're going to keep units separate from costs at this point. But remember these numbers because you're going to use them. We'll have to come back up and grab them. Now, step 1. So first of all, we deal with the units to be accounted for. We've got to figure out how many units and how do they lay out. What do I assign costs to? So I began with 30,000. I started 90,000. That means I have 120,000 to account for. I transferred 100,000. That means I have 20,000 left in ending work in process. So I have balanced that, see? I transferred this, I have this left, I'm balanced. Now I'm going to need these numbers too. So now I have to figure out equivalent units of production. And that's where those percentages come in handy. So for the ones I transferred out, everything's 100%. So direct materials, I have 100,000 complete. Conversion, I have 100,000 complete. What's left? My ending work in process? Well, I have 20,000 at 100%, so I have 20,000 in direct materials. But my conversion costs, I have 20,000, but only 25% of that can be considered complete. If you use that particular line of thought. So that means I actually have 5,000 complete as far as costs are concerned. If I multiply that times that. So now I have direct materials, EUP of 120,000, totally done with the direct materials. Conversion, I only have 105 for the costs. So I've got that. That was step 1 and step 2. Now the fun begins. I'm going to match these, okay, with the costs. My beginning inventory was 100% direct materials, 81,000. My conversion was 108,900. I'm going to add to that the cost we incurred. So I had total cost of 360 in material, total cost of 485,100 in conversion costs. Now, that's where I find these equivalent units and divide that into those amounts to find the per unit, okay, cost. So it's $3 for direct materials and $462 for conversion. And now I can figure out my what is the costs that are going to be completed and transferred. So I transferred out 100,000 units at $3 a unit. That's from this right up here. I transferred out 100,000 at $462 a unit. So that gives me $762,000 I transferred into finished goods. I have to account for my working cost of working inventory. I had 20,000, completely used up all the direct materials at 60,000, and then I had 5,000 times the 462. Remember, I only had 25% of the 20,000. That gives me total cost accounted for $845,100. Is that what I need to account for? Yep. These were my total costs. Total costs accounted for. Now you take all of this and put it together into what they call a process cost summary, weighted average method. Here's where you did the flow. This is your unit information. Here's your how you figured out your equivalent units, and here's your assignment of costs, and then here's your reconciliation with the amount of cost to be accounted for, and they match. And that is process cost. I will go over entries later. Right now we're right at 15 minutes. If you absorb this much, I'll be really happy. We will go over this in class over and over and over again. Okay?